Hi, I'm Carrie Brothers. You may or may not have met me in a training or on the other training that I've done online just recently. I'm one of the new trainers here at CDR and I'm glad to be here. One of my projects is to get this online training up and running, so thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your patience with this as we are tweaking and working out little glitches and things. You are here for Health and Safety 101, and this is kind of a long one here, so we're just going to go ahead and jump into it and get started. Alright, let me see if I can pull up my PowerPoint here. Alright, Health and Safety 101. Alright, so you've all heard of Benjamin Franklin, and one of his favorite famous quotes here is, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." And there's a lot of truth in this. If we can think forward and try to prevent things from happening, that's going to save us a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money in the end. So that's what we're trying to do with health and safety. We're trying to think ahead at possible problems, possible issues, and trying to prevent them from happening so we don't have to deal with the consequences later. All right. What I have here about prevention and control of infectious disease really is straight out of the state minimum standards. Sick children are not allowed in the center, but what constitutes someone as sick? Several things here: fever of 100.4, diarrhea, vomiting, unexplained rash, scabies, and lice, or a physician requiring the child to be separated from other kids. And of course, if there's any other thing that obviously means that the child is sick, they should stay away as well. Alright, so those are some things you need to be sure that the teachers understand and the parents also understand. So what happens, they sometimes come to school and they're fine, and then while they're at school they get sick. So what do if they do get sick at school or preschool, daycare? The first thing you need to do is you need to isolate and remove them. They do not need to be around other kids because, as you know, germs travel quickly and kids get sick. Kids can get sick very, very quickly. You've probably all been in a situation where once one kid got sick, within days, like, half the school was sick with something similar. So you've got to isolate them and remove them. This is important for their health, but also for their parents. A lot of these parents are working parents and just honestly can't afford to take off time from work. So we're trying to keep this as preventable as we can here. The child who is separated does have to have supervision. They cannot be by themselves, even if they're sleeping. You need to notify the child's guardian or parent, and they have to come, or they have to arrange for someone else to come and take care of the child. Anything that the child had been playing with or sleeping on that day has got to be cleaned and sanitized. So something else you need to remember is that when a contagious disease does enter the center, parents of the exposed children must be notified. So if you have a child in your class who has the flu or lice or something like that, you've got to notify all the other parents so that they can be on the ball, watching their own children and trying to keep these things at bay for them. We also want to encourage the parents to notify the center when they know their child is sick or who has been exposed to a serious contagious illness outside of the center. So this is something that you want to encourage them when you talk to them, and also something that you'll probably want to put into a newsletter or to the parent handbook. Also, what you want to put in the parent handbook is that 100.4 is the magic temperature. Once the temperature reaches 100.4, it's very likely that the child is infected with whatever. Children need to be fever-free and symptom-free for 24 hours before re-entry into center. So you can see the importance of trying to isolate the child and isolate the sickness, because if they have to wait 24 hours after they're completely well, then that's a whole nother day of the child not being at daycare. That's a whole nother day of the parents having to take off from work. So if the child gets injured, you need to fill out this form here. This form is not great copy or copy and paste of what's in the Alabama minimum standards here. This has to be filled out if a child is gets sick or is injured at daycare. It does say that if there's any major injury that requires emergency medical treatment, that this does have to be reported to DHR within 24 hours. So be sure that you read that. Of course, you need to have several people in your daycare center that know first aid very well and who can perform CPR. They need to have up-to-date, current certification in that. And another thing you need to have posted in all rooms is the number for poison control, which is here, 1-800-222-1222. And if there is some type of poison, a scare of poison, a child ingesting poisoning or getting into poison, then this number needs to be called. This number probably also could be put in another part of the presentation, which we'll get to in a minute. All right, so medication. You cannot just go and give a child medicine, obviously, in your daycare center. You have to have written authorization, and it has to be on the required form. And I think that on the next page, you will see a copy of this, but this is going to actually be page 93 of the state minimum standards. The form has got to be complete with the date, dosage, storage, specific instructions, and how it is to be administered. Over-the-counter and prescription medications have got to be in the original container. Over-the-counter cannot have ever been opened up before. It has to be sealed. Physicians, prescription drugs have to have a pharmacy label or physician's written instructions, and guardians actually have to leave the measuring device. So if you send some over-the-counter Tylenol or ibuprofen in, you can't just expect for the people at the daycare center to use their own measuring devices. You have to give them a fresh one. Medications have to be administered by specific people on the staff. They all the time, unless they are actually being used at that very moment, have got to be in locked storage and cannot in any way be accessible to kids. Unused medications have to be returned to parents or disposed of when they're no longer needed, and everything has to be documented. Document. Anytime you give a child medication, you've got to document it. All right, so this is going to be, again, not a great copy, but nevertheless, this is a copy of the authorization form. This is going to be in your the state minimum standards as well. All right, so that's about medication and illness and injury. So right now we need to talk about sleeping for infants, and this is kind of a hot topic all the time, really. It's something that we get very concerned about, and probably for very good reason. A couple things we need to ask ourselves here is how often are sheets changed and cribs cleaned? And the answer to this means for infants, it needs to be every day, actually. For older kids, for toddlers, it needs to be once a week. Infants, it needs to be at least once a day, maybe more if for some reason we haven't had a diaper leakage or a major spit up event or something like that. This, again, is out of the state minimum standards, so you can go in there and look at this if you want more clarification on this. Babies are allowed to form his or own pattern of sleeping and waking. You are on their schedule. They are not on your schedule. You've all heard of sudden infant death syndrome, and to lower the risk of this, the infants must be placed on their back at sleep. If the baby actually does flip over on his own or her own, it's okay to leave them that way, but they have got to be laid down on their back to sleep initially. And the only item in the crib can be a snug fitting sheet. So there will be no blankets in the crib. There will be no... I don't know what's going on here. Okay, there will be no blankets. There will be no toys. There will be no stuffed animals or anything like that. The only exception to this is pacifiers. If the baby likes a pacifier has been proven to lower the risk of SIDS, and so the American Academy of Pediatrics says that pacifiers are fine if the baby wants to take them and if the parents are okay with it. Alright, so we're going to watch a small little video here about having babies in the cribs and what to do, kind of what the method for this should be. Okay, as you see here, it says offer a passy at bedtime. After feeding, put your baby back to sleep in a separate sleep area and never place your baby to sleep on any soft surface. So that means you don't place them to sleep on your bed or the sofa or anything like that. So let's watch this.
Halo presents Baby Care Basics and Sleep Tips from author, mother, and pediatrician Dr. Tanya Altman.
20% of SIDS cases actually occur in daycare when a baby is outside of his home. So don't forget to remind all caregivers, including grandparents and babysitters, these safe sleep practices. It's important to help reduce your infant's risk of SIDS and suffocation. Wherever your baby sleeps, consider these safe sleep practices. Make sure your crib is safe. Remove all soft bedding and toys from your baby's sleep area. Place baby to sleep on his or her back at nap time and at nighttime. Offer a pacifier at bedtime to babies who are more than 1 month old after breastfeeding has been established. After feeding, put your baby back to sleep in their separate safe sleep area. Never place your baby to sleep on any soft surface. Make sure your crib is sturdy and safe. Do not depend on baby monitors to reduce the risk of SIDS. Do not allow smoking around your baby. Do not let your baby overheat. And provide tummy time when your baby is awake. Thank you for taking the time to learn about how you can decrease your infant's risk for sudden infant death syndrome.
The Halo Sleep Sack wearable blanket keeps babies sleeping.
Alright, so that was obviously targeted more towards parents of babies, but all of the things they talk about in there are things that we need to know as well. So thank you for watching that. Alright, so some other things we need to remember don't leave the baby in car seat sleeping. So if mom brings in baby in the morning, the baby is falling asleep in the car seat, the temptation, of course, is to let the baby continue to sleep there, but you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this. You have to pull the baby out and put them in the crib or hold them. They cannot be left in the car seat sleeping. They cannot also be left in the bouncy seat or swing sleeping. Also a temptation. What happens with this is there's a slight risk of strangulation with the straps, but also because of the way their body is positioned, their lungs don't have the room to move and things like that. So you got to keep the babies out of bouncy seats or swings when they're sleeping. If they do fall asleep, take them out promptly and put them into their crib. In the cribs, you all know this, don't have any type of bumpers, blankets, or toys in crib. I don't imagine any of y'all at your daycare would actually have bumper pads in the crib, but if you do, take them out. I do think that the temptation, especially in the winter, is to throw a blanket in the crib with the baby, and you just are not allowed to do this. You will be breaking laws if you do this. So no blanket in the crib, no toys in the crib at all. Always, always, always lay the baby back to sleep. The only time you can put a baby on their belly or use a sleep positioner or something like that is when the pediatrician, the child's pediatrician or doctor, signs a waiver saying that it is best for the baby to sleep on their belly. All the time, except for this one exception, baby has to go on their back. Like we said earlier, sleep times need to be individualized to each baby. Ideally, and I know that life is not ideal and this cannot always happen, but ideally cribs need to be 36 inches apart. And this is to maybe try to keep the babies from bothering each other or waking each other up, but it's also to help to help to prevent the spread of germs. Supervision is always necessary. You cannot leave the room. Even if the baby is happy and sleeping and everything's great, there always has to be there always has to be somebody in the room with the baby, an adult in the room. I do want to point out, I just saw a note I wrote to myself here where I said cribs need to be 36 inches apart. This is not a DHR standard here. It's ideal, and it's what we look for if someone is evaluating you for Eckers. This is something that they'll be looking at in Eckers. Children cannot be left in the crib crying for more than 2 to 3 minutes. So if they're whimpering, you can give them 2 or 3 minutes to settle themselves down. If it's any more than that, they've got to be brought out. If they're happy laying in the crib, that's great. You can give them 15 minutes. They might just need that quiet time to be there and to talk to themselves, but you cannot leave them in there for more than 15 minutes, even if the baby's happy. You can look at this chart right here. This is talking about infant deaths, and SUID is, I forgot actually what it stands for, sudden unidentified infant death rate. And this combines things like SIDS, unknown causes, and accidental suffocation and strangulation in bed. And you can see from 1990, where the Back to Sleep campaign was started, to now, the number of infant deaths has decreased pretty significantly, particularly with the Back to Sleep, with the sudden infant death syndrome, by 50%. So this is a huge deal, and this is a great thing. On this next page right here, we're going to watch a video of this man and his family and what they actually experienced with a SIDS incident in their home.
Each year in the United States, approximately 3,500 infants die from sleep-related deaths. In hopes of reducing that number, the American Academy of Pediatrics has just released its latest safe sleep recommendations.
The safest place for the baby to sleep is in a crib or a bassinet or a playpen, something that's separate from where the parent is sleeping. And the only thing that should be in the crib should be a tight-fitting mattress with a tight-fitting sheet and the baby, nothing else. There should be no bumper pads, no pillows, no blankets, no stuffed animals, just the crib, the mattress, and the baby.
Dr. Sam and Maura Hankey know too well the tragedy of losing a baby to sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, when 6 years ago Sam and their newborn son Charlie were napping together on the sofa.
The one time he wasn't in his crib was that horrible night.
The risk of SIDS is 5 times higher if a baby is placed on any soft or squishy surface such as couches, pillows, or blankets. Doing so can create an air pocket, making it difficult for the baby to breathe. Bed sharing also increases the chance of SIDS.
We know that bringing the baby into bed with you, surrounding the baby with soft bedding so the baby doesn't fall onto a hard surface, all of these things that parents think are going to keep their baby safe, in reality make it more dangerous for their baby.
The image of putting a baby to sleep in an empty crib, I think, feels cold and harsh. In reality, it's very safe. It's the best thing that you can do for your baby.
As a parent and as a pediatrician, I did what I thought was best for my child. I didn't think that SIDS could happen to me, but it did happen to me. And it can happen to anyone. And that is why it's so important to follow these recommendations for each and every sleep, at nap time and at night.
I'm Jack Trammell.
All right, so as you can see here, it's a very sad situation. Again, that's something that happened at home. There are some statistics I have seen recently that say a huge number of these SIDS deaths actually do happen in daycare, and so it is something that we need to be aware of. We can also see here that that SIDS breaks all racial and financial, social, economic barriers. This is something that is a concern for everybody. Thankfully, I will say, thankfully, it is not something that happens. It's not something that happens all the time, every day, but it is definitely a concern, and it's something that you need to be very aware of in your classroom. All right, so once they have graduated out of the crib and they're on some type of cot or something, you need to remember still that supervision is critical. And Again, we want to see mats more than 18 inches apart. That is difficult. I know that. That's one of Ecker's recommendations. And naps should not be more than 2.5 hours long. Bedding cannot touch each other. It cannot touch other bedding and storage. So you can't just go and stuff a whole bunch of nap mats together, or when you stack the concept sheets cannot touch each other, because that is a way to spread disease, lice, scabies, and things like that. So you've got to keep things separate to try to keep them as sanitary as possible. You do need to be sure that you have some light in the room so that you can supervise easily. I would say you could also need to have some light in your room so that you don't feel the temptation to fall asleep as much. I probably would. You need to be sure that you walk around and check on the kids every 15 minutes to make sure that nobody's struggling, or see if anybody needs anything. All right, so shaken baby syndrome is also another hard thing to talk about in addition to the SIDS. Shaken baby syndrome is an injury caused to a baby caused by being shaken violently and repeatedly. Shaking can cause swelling of the brain, internal bleeding, detached retinas, leading to blindness, mental retardation, and death. And it is really, babies are really hard. I mean, I've had 3 of my own. I've worked with babies before, and babies are very, very hard and very, very frustrating. And there is a temptation for some people, I think, to want to cause injury to their child, even children that they love. The thing is that you can't do it. You're the adult. You've got to take a step back. You've got to breathe, and you cannot shake babies because you are because you're frustrated with them. All right. So head trauma here. What is head trauma, and what are the symptoms? Head trauma is defined as an event where the head suddenly and very violently hits an object, or when an object pierces the skull and enters the brain tissue. And this is very, very dangerous. It can be common in young children, sometimes because of accidents, actually. But concussions can be difficult to recognize in infants and toddlers because they're not able to describe how they feel. So you need to know that some nonverbal clues of a concussion may include appearing kind of dazed, listlessness and tiring easily, irritability, excessive crying, loss of balance, change in eating or sleeping patterns, or lack of interest in toys. And so you, as the daycare worker, need to just be aware of the baby's patterns and things that look different, things that don't seem right. If this is a consistent thing, it may be something that you need to address. All right, so we're about to go and talk a little bit about food. And before we do that, I just want to remind you that you always need to know allergies. You always need to know what allergies are in your classroom, and you need to know what allergies are in your center. And we'll talk about allergies a little bit more in just a second. But just before we talk about food, I wanted to be sure to point out that before you feed a child, you need to know if he or she has any allergies. All right, so straight out of Alabama State Minimum Standards, food needs to be placed on unbreakable dinnerware or napkins. Children have got to be Children have got to be seated while they're eating. No child needs to be forced to eat. Children are not going to be allowed in the kitchen, or are not allowed in the kitchen. And meals and snacks, including portion amounts, will follow the preschool meal guidelines, which is something that I will attach to this module here. So you need to be sure you look at that and be sure that when you're feeding the kids that you're also giving them the right amount of food. All right, so when we're talking about actually feeding infants and toddlers, we need to remember to have everything labeled with the child's name. It's very easy to get bottles mixed up or sippy cups mixed up or things like that. So everything does need to be labeled with the child's name. Have a Sharpie available for mom or dad when they drop the child off, so that if the names are not on the bottles, that they can be written on very easily. Have that Sharpie close by so you don't have to be going and looking for it. Bottles, nipples, spoons, and bowls have got to be cleaned well. All open jars of baby food have to be sent home or discarded at the end of the day. You cannot hold onto a jar of baby food that's been partially eaten and feed that to the baby the next day. You have to either get rid of it or send it home and let the mom decide what to do with it, with mom or dad or guardian or whatever. Okay, just like with preschoolers, you're going to need to follow the infant meal pattern guidelines when infant and toddler meal pattern guidelines when providing meals and snacks. And I, again, will attach that to this module so you can review that. Infants do need to be held while bottle feeding. Do not prop bottles. I'm working on a infant safety workshop right now, and that's one of the things that we're talking about a lot, is that it's just for so many reasons not good to prop the bottle. One is that when you're propping a bottle, a lot of times you're actually getting a blanket very, very close to the child's face, and that's dangerous. Another is that they're just not being held, and it's very important for their emotional development to be held and to be loved. Another thing is that when bottles are propped, the baby sometimes can't swallow as fast as the milk is coming out, and this can cause choking, and that is just not what you want to happen. After the baby is fed, you need to be sure you write down the time and the ounces taken. This it probably, it's a pretty easy thing to do, and it's something that may actually help with some medical needs one day eventually, if the mom needs to address something with the pediatrician. Alright, so food safety. Just some foods that may cause choking need to be prepared appropriately for the age and the ability of each child. I love grapes. I think most kids love grapes, but they just are a major choking hazard. And so if you have grapes, be sure that those are cut at least in half. I would say preferably in quarters for toddlers. Same thing with hot dogs. They need to be cut very, very well. The following foods are only served under very, very close supervision, like nuts, peanut butter, small pieces of raw vegetables, food with bones, popcorn. You cannot turn your back. You have to be watching the kids all the time when they are eating these. And I would say, well, we'll get to that in a second when we're talking about allergies. All right, diapering. Infants and toddlers. Wet and soiled diapers and other clothing need to be changed promptly. You don't let the baby walk around the classroom all day long with a wet diaper, or with a diaper that they pooped in. It's just kind of gross. It actually can hurt them, and it's uncomfortable too. No infant can be left unattended while being diapered, so don't put the baby on the changing table and then walk away. You can't do that. Infants, toddlers cannot be diapered on the floor. So the staff has got to wash their hands with soap and water immediately before and after diapering the child, and single-use disposable gloves have got to be used for diapering each child. Diapering areas shall be separate from food service and preparation areas. So you may not put bottles on top of the diaper changing table when you're preparing the bottles. Just be very cognizant of tendencies like that. We're going to watch a short little video here on the proper way to change a child's diaper.
To demonstrate caring for our children and enters an accurate diaper changing procedure. The first thing you need to do when changing a diaper is prepare your station. You need a hands-free diaper pail to dispose of the diaper. Hands-free meaning you use a foot pedal. If you have a station where you can open the door and leave it open, put it under the sink like that. If not, pull the trash can out and shut the door. Since I've touched the trash can, I need to wash my hands before I begin. So I turn on the water, I wet my hands, I get soap, and I begin to rub. I need to do it for 20 seconds. So you can either count in your head, or you can count out loud to model for the children. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Then you rinse. Paper towel. Drying your hands thoroughly before using the paper towel to turn off the water. Now I'm going to prepare my station. I need to get a diaper, and if you have a ledge that you can put your item on, instead of putting them directly on the diaper changing table, that is the best. So I'm going to put my clean diaper, and I'm going to grab my wipes. I need one clean wipe for my hands, one clean wipe for the child's hands, and a couple of wipes to clean the child's bottom. Remember, never put your white box on the diaper changing table. This is a dirty surface. Next, I'm going to grab my gloves. Again, do not bring the glove box to the diaper changing surface. I'm going to put on my gloves and get my child. Now I'm ready to begin my diaper changing. So I lay the child on the surface. The minute I start to open the diaper up, I am now dirty. So I don't want to do anything else but care for this child in their diaper. I'm going to wipe top to bottom and leave the diaper under the child. Grab my first wipe top to bottom and leave it on the diaper. Wipe top to bottom and leave it on the diaper. She's clean. I'm going to grab my diaper and put it directly into the trash can, making sure to keep track of my child. Then I'm going to take off my gloves, pinching from the middle, and then up and down, and put it in the hands-free diaper changing, keeping an eye on my child. Next, I'm going to wipe my hands with a clean wipe, throwing it into the trash can. The child's hands with a clean wipe, throwing it into the trash can. Now that my hands are clean, the child's hands are clean, I will grab my clean diaper. Now, using the wipes does not replace hand washing. So I will be washing her hands immediately after getting her dressed and our diaper changing sink. I'm going to wet her hands first. Again, apply soap to one hand and the other, and then begin washing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Then I'm going to rinse her hands. Grab my paper towel and dry her hands off thoroughly, and use my paper towel to turn off the water. Then I'm going to put my child back to the play area, and I need to come immediately back to my table because my hands are still dirty and I need to clean. I start to clean the surface with soap and water first. I'll apply that to the surface and wipe it down. Throw that into the trash can. Then the bleach and water, apply that to the surface. And we're going to let that set for at least 2 minutes. My hands are still dirty from cleaning and changing a diaper, so I will wash them now. Wet first. Soap. Again, 20 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Rinse. And use the paper towel to turn off the faucet. Now, while the bleach is still on my table, I can grab the diaper changing log because my hands are clean. I can report what I just changed, and I'm ready to begin again.
All right, so that was kind of a very long process of changing diapers, but that really is the way it's supposed to be done to best care for the children. All right, I took a little break in there to go rest my voice. But we will go on now talking about toileting. So we just finished talking about diapering the babies and the toddlers, and so now we're up to the older children with toileting. So just like with babies, and we're kind of following their needs, we're going to also be following preschoolers' needs. Yes, we can try to get everyone going at the same time, but actually we need to be making sure that each child is taken to the bathroom according to their individual needs. We're going to try to do that as much as possible. And after using the bathroom, every child's hands need to be washed with soap and running water. All right, so hand washing here, and this is I'm putting after toileting up for obvious reasons here, but we need to be washing hands after each diaper change, even when gloves are used, after helping a child go to the toilet, after touching any bodily fluids directly or indirectly. And when I say indirectly, what I mean is even when there's a tissue between your hands and the body fluid, your hands need to be washed, and before, during, and after handling any food. So every time you get the chance, it says here you can't wash your hands too much. You probably technically could wash your hands too much, but definitely when you're dealing with diapering and toileting issues, you want to make sure they are clean, and you want to make sure they're clean when preparing food. So be sure you do that. We're going to watch a video here. I believe this was put out by the CDC on how to wash hands properly. If I can get it going. Oh, let's try again. All right.
Hand washing is one of the most important ways you can keep from getting sick and spreading germs to others. Dirty hands spread disease. This hand washing demonstration will show you how hand washing can get rid of germs and chemicals that get on our hands every day. This gel is like the germs and chemicals that we get from things we touch throughout the day, like our toys and pets. If we then rub our eyes, nose, or mouth, or pick up something to eat, the germs or chemicals can get into our bodies and make us sick. Studies have shown that people touch their eyes, nose, and mouth about 25 times every hour without even realizing it. To get rid of these germs and chemicals, CDC recommends you follow these easy steps every time you wash your hands. Wet, lather, scrub, rinse, and dry. We're going to show you the right way to do each step. First, wet your hands with clean running water. Turn off the tap and apply soap. Then, lather your hands by rubbing them together with the soap. Be sure to lather the backs of your hands, between your fingers, and under your nails. Scrub your hands for at least 20 seconds. If you don't have a clock nearby, keep scrubbing until you've sung the Happy Birthday song twice. Rinse your hands well under clean running water. Dry your hands using a clean towel, electric hand dryer, or air dry them. Washing your hands using the steps we just demonstrated is very important to get hands completely clean. Let's see how well we got rid of the germs and chemicals. Great! No more germs and chemicals. Why is this so important? Germs and chemicals from unwashed hands can get into our foods and drinks when they're being prepared or when we're eating or drinking them, which can make us sick. Also, germs and chemicals from unwashed hands can be transferred to other objects like cell phones, tabletops, or toys, and then transferred to other people's hands. That's why it's so important to wash your hands following these steps. Wet, lather, scrub, rinse, and dry, so you can stay healthy and help keep those around you healthy. For more information, visit cdc.gov/hand washing.
All right, one thing that I would like to point out that I think they missed on that video that I just noticed is that they didn't show anyone turning the water off after the hands were clean. And what I really want to encourage you to do, and what I want you to encourage your children to do, is to use the paper towel that you dry your hands off with and turn the faucet off with that paper towel. And then if you have a door that you have to pull to open, you need to use that paper towel for that also. Germs can very easily be transferred on the faucet and the doorknob, or the pull to the door. So be sure that you use your paper towels to open those things and turn that off also. All right, so here we are talking a little bit more about allergies. We had said earlier that we really, really need to know what all allergies are in the center. So allergies must be noted in each child's file. I'm going to say post all children's allergies on the wall in every room. So at your daycare center, do you have just the allergies in your room posted? I would encourage you to just make a master list of all of the children with these big allergies and put a copy of that in every single room. You never know when, for some reason, another teacher is with your class and may need to have this information or something. Things go weird some days. Sometimes things happen that are out of the ordinary, and everyone needs to be accustomed, everyone needs to be knowledgeable about major allergies in all children at the center. I'm going to also say avoid major allergens, particularly if there's a child allergic to it. Peanut butter is the hot button one right now, and I love peanut butter so much. If you have someone who is strongly allergic to peanut butter in the classroom, just avoid it. Just avoid it. You just don't want to risk making that child sick or putting that child into shock. So if you have a child who does have a major allergy, try to notify the parents about that also, so that they can be sensitive to it. So you need to be familiar with a severe allergy emergency plan. What are you going to do if you do have a child in your classroom that is going into shock because somehow he or she ingested peanuts? You need to know what to do with that. And you also need to be familiar with EpiPens. And we'll watch a video on EpiPens in just a second. But you're going to want to check EpiPens periodically to make sure that they're not expired, because sometimes that can happen. So I would say once or twice a year, put it on your calendar to check these EpiPens to make sure that they are still valid. So here's a video on using EpiPens, and this is obviously an older child here, but the principles are the same.
Yeah, he's crying really good. Can you help?
In all my years as a licensed paramedic working on the street, not many acute illnesses are as scary as a severe allergic reaction. We have a fancy word to call that. It's called anaphylaxis, which is the body's reaction to something that is causing them to have a number of different symptoms that could lead to a life-threatening emergency. In this scenario, we're going to teach you what anaphylaxis is, what it's doing in the body, and then how we may be able to treat them until emergency medical services arrive. So what is anaphylaxis? Anaphylaxis is an allergic reaction where the body does a couple different things at the same exact time. While the blood vessels are dilating and becoming leaky, allowing fluid to leak out into the tissues of the body, decreasing the blood pressure, something else is tightening, and it's the airways. The bronchioles, the alveoli sacs are filling with mucus and fluids, and basically we have these two mechanisms working together to create a serious life-threatening problem. So the signs that this person might be showing is not only the itchy, the hives, the scratchy, the itchy throat, the swollen tongue, the swollen lips. Those are all kind of superficial as far as the outside of the body, but what is happening inside is what we hear most of the time, and that's difficulty breathing, wheezing, gasping for breath, and not able to get it in. This is caused by those bronchial constrictions, as well as the fact that she might be feeling lightheaded and looking pale because her heart rate is trying to increase, and she's also losing blood pressure. So these are some things that we're going to be aware of as we're dealing with this anaphylactic patient. Now in this scenario, though, she was wise. She understands that she's having a problem, and she told somebody who was a bystander to go get help. in this training scenario, she's already been prescribed epinephrine for these types of emergencies. But in this case, didn't know she had a food allergy. So her brother shared the candy bar with her. It might have had an allergen in it. Obviously it did. And now she's reacting to it. So as soon as we could, we got to her EpiPen. A few points to think about here is we need to make sure that the date is still within the expiration range so that it's good. We're going to pull the cap off, the safety cap, and it's important to remember that we grip it firmly in our hand, but we do not put a thumb over the needle area or over the back of the EpiPen. Now that this has been readied, I'm going to hand it to this victim who's now going to auto-inject. She puts it into her big muscle in her thigh and holds it there for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. She now takes it out of her leg and lays it beside her. While she does that, she massages the leg and tries to get the medicine to absorb into that deep intermuscular injection. Now, while we're letting that get into the system, if we have not already called 911, we should be. So if you have a phone, dial 911 and get emergency medical services on the way. If you don't have a phone, send somebody to go call 911 immediately. If there's a delay in emergency medical services of greater than 5 to 10 minutes, and the patient actually has a second auto-injector available, we can actually deliver a second auto-injector if the signs and symptoms of her anaphylaxis have not improved. Now, we're always going to be monitoring this patient for an increased problem, maybe a loss of consciousness, increased difficulty of breathing, or respiratory arrest, and then eventually cardiac arrest. And we're going to treat them accordingly while we wait for EMS to arrive.
All right, obviously the child in that video was more of a teenager than a child, and so she was administering her own EpiPen. So I do want to point out that in your situation, if something like this were to happen, then you would, as the adult, need to be the one administering the EpiPen. But I think that was a good video in showing you how it's done and what kind of the basic of what is going on in the body when someone does start going into anaphylactic shock. This is a situation that I hope no one we work with is ever in. It is a possibility, so we need to be prepared. All right, so what are considered... Okay, so now we're talking about storage of hazardous materials. But what are hazardous materials? We've got some listed here: bleach water, cleaners, hand sanitizer, diaper ointment, medicine, spray paint, insect repellent, ant poison, sunblock, whiteout, and anything labeled keep out of reach of children. There are a lot of things labeled keep out of reach of children. So if that's what it says, it is considered a hazardous material. Okay, so this is kind of a fun one. Think about real quickly, where do you think that hazardous materials are found? Here are some places. On the diaper changing table, that diaper rash ointment is considered a poison. Under the bathroom sink. Hopefully in your setting you haven't even you've never even thought about putting anything like that underneath the sink at child's level, but it is considered a poison and it cannot be low to the ground. Backpacks in closets. One time I was doing an observation in a center and the teacher's purse happened to be sitting out, and I glanced in it and I saw prescription medicine sitting there in the teacher's purse, and that can potentially be a very dangerous situation, particularly if you have a very, very curious child there. So precautions. Keep all substances labeled keep out of reach of children locked up. Purses with teacher medicines need to be locked up. Bleach water doesn't have to be locked up, but put up high. This is probably the least expensive cleaning product, sanitation product, and it's very effective. And thankfully, it's not overly poisonous. It is got a lot of chlorine in it, so it does need to be put up high away from kids, but it does not technically need to be behind lock and key. Another thing you need to remember is that bleach water, although it's recommended, we do not want you to spray it on any surface if the children are nearby, because we don't want them to breathe in that mist that comes out. And children's medicines need to be locked up in the office. They do not need to be in your classroom. They need to be locked up in office far away from children. All right, so we need to talk about emergency preparedness. So what are different types of emergencies? Some that I have listed here in my notes are tornadoes. If you live anywhere in Alabama, you know that this is a real threat, particularly in the spring fires. At the time of this recording, there were just horrible, horrible fires up in the Gatlinburg area. Earthquakes, if you were living out west, this would be an issue. You hear about some earthquakes, a few little earthquakes every year or so in Alabama. So we need to know how to do that. A utility emergency, heaven forbid, an active shooter or a robbery going on. You need to know how to deal with that. Does your center have a plan? Do you practice it? Do you know what to do if there is an emergency situation like that? I think this slide is actually in the wrong place here, so forgive me for that. All right, I think I'm where I need to be right now. So basically, we need to know what to do when an emergency situation does arise. A plan for the evacuation and care of children in case of fire, tornado, serious accident or injury, or power failure shall be established and posted in a conspicuous place in the center. So any adult coming into the center should have a good idea as to what's going to happen in case of emergency. And sometimes these things really do happen. My daughters are school age, but they actually did have to have a real lockdown last year just because of, some robbery out a couple miles away. But the police told them they had to be on lockdown, and so they had to go into lockdown mode. So it was something that they had to know what to do, the teachers and the students and the administration, and they had to follow through with it. All right, evacuation. Different reasons you would need to evacuate. Smoke in the building, fire, gas leak, bomb threat. You need to have a written plan. You need to review it regularly with staff. You need to call 911 if a situation does come up, and you need to let parents know. When you are leaving the building, you need to count children before you exit, during the evaluation, and then upon re-entry. Kids and services will be taken care of by that adult. So if you have a child that is in speech or something like that, in the case of an evacuation, whatever teacher, whatever adult the child is with at that time is a teacher that will be in charge of that child during the situation. You'll want to pick up your emergency pack on the way out. And in an emergency pack, you need to have things like parents' phone numbers, Band-Aids, maybe some bottled water, or dry formula, or like a box of granola bars or something like that, so that you can keep the kids taken care of. Maybe put some toys or games in there also, and have the kids taken care of and entertained during this time. Shelter in place. This is similar here. Tornado, earthquake, armed intruder, hostage situation. There are different weather events also. We'll get to that in just a second. This is when you're going to actually be taking shelter inside the building rather than evacuating the building. All right, so different weather situations. During severe weather, if windows are not secure, move children to the interior rooms and hallways. Tornado warning. Again, this is a very real thing that could happen in Alabama. During the tornado warning, staff will move children to a designated safe room. Everyone sits facing the wall. The person in charge will ensure the evacuation pack is with the staff and children are in the shelter, and the person in charge will verify that all staff and children are accounted for. Okay, so you just need to be prepared, and everyone needs to know what their role is. This is a very, very stressful time, and a time for a lot of chaos to break out, and that is not a good thing. You do not want chaos to break out in this type of situation. Okay, this would be a terrifying situation to be in, an armed intruder or hostage situation, and this is Very, very unlikely. Unfortunately, every couple of years we hear about something like this, so we do need to know a plan. If something like that happens, call 911, of course. Staff will move the children to safety, either in a room inside the locked doors, or quickly taken outside the building. Don't try to confront the intruder, but if you're approached by the intruder, you need to try to remain calm. We need to pay attention to details and try to accommodate. And of course, the biggest part here is we need to try to have a plan. Have a plan and insert into the staff handbook. Review this 1 to 2 times a year so everyone knows what to do. Make parents aware of what the plan is through the parent handbook. Let them know what you're going to do and how you're going to notify them on updates should something like this happen. Each class should post evacuation maps, secondary evacuation routes, location of fire extinguishers, etc., etc. And this is so that even if you as a teacher know where everything is, if you have a substitute that day or a parent volunteer or something, they will know also how to handle everything. Drills should be conducted regularly. In discussing things like this with the children, we need to try to teach the kids not to panic, and they need to walk and not run, because again, when panic ensues, things get very, very dangerous very, very quickly. If you have kids in your class who are physically challenged, or you're taking care of babies, you need to pay particular attention to your plan, because this is going to be exceptionally challenging trying to keep these kids safe. Make sure that parents understand that they cannot check children out during the actual evacuation. Once the children are accounted for, once you know where all the kids are, at that point, the parent can come check the child out. Although, I will say that more times than not, it's actually safer for the kid to stay and for the parent to stay where they are, rather than a parent trying to come in and take the child. All right, so now we're going to talk about going outside and some outside safety information here. You need to know that per the Alabama State Minimum Standards, the inspection of outdoor play areas should happen every day. You need to look for broken equipment, large sticks, broken glass, and remove these things as soon as you see them. When you are out in the playground, of course, your primary responsibility is to keep the kids safe. You need to know where all kids are all the time. Can the children see you? Can you hear the children? And can the children hear you? If there's an emergency situation, you want to know where everybody is, and they need to know where you are also. All right, so let's talk a little bit here about indoor safety. You need to have sign in and sign out sheets, of course, every day, so that you know who's there and who's not there. When indoors, make sure that your environment is safe. You want to keep doors closed and pathways cleared. Have easy and simple rules for children to know and to follow. You need to know what items are hazardous and what you should keep out of reach of children. Okay, major indoor hazards. Here are some things that you need to be aware of in your classroom. Do you have electrical safety caps on your outlets? Do you have loose electrical cords? If you do, you need to figure out a way to hide those. Heavy objects or furniture children can pull down. Medicine and cleaning materials that are not locked away. Pot handles and stoves accessible. Although it would be odd to have a stove inside your classroom. But if you do, you need to be sure that things like the stove controls and the pot handles are unavailable. Water too hot, mats, the rugs that slide. That's actually a big one that we've seen before. You need to be sure that there's some friction on your rugs. Are play areas in front of doors? If they are, that is a bad place for them. You can hurt people that way or accidentally. Some major outdoor safety hazards. Tools not meant for children's use are accessible. Anything that's labeled to keep out of reach of children, like ant poison, it's not locked away. Sharp or dangerous objects, unsafe walkways, easy to access road, hazardous trash available, play equipment that poses a threat or of entrapment, or play equipment that's too high. These are all major outdoor safety hazards that you need to look at immediately and try to figure out how to work with them or how to get rid of them so that you can ensure the safety of the kids. We also need to talk about bodies of water. If you're going to take the child swimming, you do have to have permission from the parents in the child's file for the children to participate in swimming or the wading activities. And ratios must be determined by the age of the youngest child in the pool. So if you have 1-year-olds through 3-year-olds in the pool, typically you could have fewer adults for a larger group with 3-year-olds, but because there are 1-year-olds in the pool, you've got to look at that and pretend that all the kids are 1 just because 1 is, because you want to err on the side of caution. Lifeguard cannot be counted in the staff to child ratio. He's there to look out for kids who are in distress and to help them, not to chase kids around the pool and to count kids. So to be counted in pools, adults must meet the child care worker qualifications. And they should also be in the pool. They cannot be sitting on the outside of the pool. If any part of the child's body is in the pool, the child is considered in the pool. So if the child is sitting on the side of the pool with his feet in the pool, then he is considered in the pool. And I do want to note that the water ratios are different for classroom ratios and water ratios. So be sure that you know that. If you have water structures that are less than 2 feet deep, you need to know that one staff has to be current in pediatric CPR and first aid in the waiting area where the children are. And 2 staff must be at each waiting structure all the time. The clean water needs to be provided daily, and waiting structures have to be emptied when they're not in use. So if you have a pool that's slightly deeper, 2 or more feet, the lifeguard has to be at the pool all the time when the pool is in use, and each lifeguard has got to have a current Red Cross training certificate. So while we're outside, I already did that slide. Excuse me, I apologize for that. So a question for you, when do you go outside? A lot of people say we go outside every day, but do you really go outside every day? Are you overly cautious with the temperature? I know that a lot of people, and I did this myself, so I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but we try to keep kids in when we're not comfortable, and we need to be aware that kids are pretty tough, and they can get out in temperatures colder than what we're comfortable with. The Eckers and the Itter says that you have got to take the kids out every day if unless there is active precipitation or an active weather warning. So today it's pretty chilly here in Tuscaloosa. It's about 47 degrees, and it feels freezing to us, but this would not be a day that Eckers would be okay with you keeping the kids inside with. What you would need to do is you would need to bundle them up and take them outside. Remember, they're moving when they're outside, so they're going to be warm. Okay, and we go outside, of course, to have fun and for the kids to learn and the exercise. Child care providers need to be actively involved in the children's play on the playground. So this is not social hour for the teachers, for them to sit around and catch up with each other. This is a time for the providers to get out and to play and talk and to experience and to develop experiences for kids that they need, really. They need that adult interaction. For some children, the only outdoor time that they receive is at preschool. And so you need to be sure that or at daycare, you need to be sure that they are getting this time. Okay, so 10 ways to improve playground supervision. Be sure you keep that ratio good. Keep at least 2 staff members supervising at all times. If you have 5 kids out there, you still need 2 adults, because if there's an emergency, one person is going to have to help the hurting child, and the other person is going to have to keep an eye on everybody else. Staff members need to all be working together. You're not just responsible for your class out there. You're partially responsible for any kid that's out there. So you need to be working together with the other teachers to have so that every child has a staff member ability to look at them at all times. You need to have a playground emergency plan. You need to keep outside staff in communication with each other inside and out. You need to figure out how to do this. Are you going to be using cell phones? Are you going to be using walkie-talkies? Of course, the temptation with cell phones is to play with them while you're outside. Ooh, excuse me. So walkie-talkies may be a better option here. Make sure that at least one person on the playground can communicate with inside staff without leaving children alone. Inspect your playground. Remember, this is something that you really need to do daily. Go out there before the day starts, or maybe while the day is going on, and inspect to make sure everything is safe there. Ask parents to remove strings from children's clothing. And staff members on the playground should keep their eyes moving and watch at all times. I know, again, it's a temptation. It is a great temptation to sit there and talk to each other, but this is a time where you really do have to keep your eyes on kids. And it's also a great time just for sitting there and assessing and watching them play a little bit more anecdotally. All right, so here we're talking about transporting station. I think we only have about 5 or 6 slides left, so that's great. In addition to the driver, required classroom ratios have to be met. So if you need one child or one adult for every 6 children in a vehicle, you need to have at least one driver, another adult, and the 6 kids. So you'll need to have 2 adults and the 6 kids. No child can be left in a vehicle without adult supervision at all times. A staff person needs to accompany each child younger than 2.5 age from the vehicle to take care to the care of the designated person. If the child is over than 2, without 2.5, visual supervision is necessary. And the driver needs to check the vehicle at each location to verify that there is no child left in the vehicle. Y'all hear these stories every summer, and they're terrifying. So you need to be sure that if you're driving a child around, that you look to make sure that the child is getting out. And each child has got to have a place and be able to put on their own seatbelt. No child's allowed to sit on the floor, and doors do need to stay locked while the car is in motion. All right, we're going to barrel on through now. Looks like we only have about 5 slides left. Children cannot be put in the front seat. Also, drivers and all passengers have got to have their seatbelts on. Children younger than 6 must be in proper seat or booster seat. So they need to be sitting in the proper sitting thing. Vehicle safety checks must be done annually. Required form is in the minimum standards, has got to be dated and signed by the mechanic of all vehicles required regularly used to transport kids, and the safety check must be on file. All right, so a couple things to remember is you don't want to ever leave children unattended. Never, never, never leave children unattended. If you need help, ask for it. This is not the time to be prideful and not to want to ask for help. If you need help, please step up and ask. Always do head counts. Be counting heads all day long. You don't want to lose a child. Never have your back to the children. They might play tricks on you. Also, you aren't going to be able to see them, and so then they may have a hard time. You may have a hard time keeping up with them. So teach the children to follow classroom rules and home rules, and we want to be sure that we create a very, very safe environment that is made for exploration. The last thing I think that we're going to talk about is abuse, and this is a sad issue. We won't hound on it too much, but the first step in helping abuse or neglected kids is to actually know the signs of abuse. The minimum definition by the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act is any recent act or failure to act on the part of a parent or caretaker which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or an act or failure to act which presents the imminent risk of serious harm. So we've got different types of abuse here. We've got the physical, which has to do with stabbing and hitting and burning and things that basically they're doing to get their frustration out on the kids. Neglect is the failure of a caretaker to provide for a child's basic needs. Sexual abuse includes any activity by that caregivers do, such as incest, rape, sodomy, indecent exposure, and production of pornographic materials. All very, very illegal. And then emotional is a pattern of behavior that impairs a child's emotional development or with sense of self-worth. And this comes through constant criticism, threats, rejection, withholding, love, etc. So we do need to be able to recognize the signs of abuse. There are a lot. I'm going to post an article here that I want you to be sure that you read, but it helps to talk through what abuse is and what you can do to help stop abuse. And you are a mandatory reporter. It means you have to talk and tell people when you really seriously think there might be some type of abuse going on. So you are a mandatory reporter, which means you do have to report abuse when you suspect it. I do want to point out that it says here you have to be reasonably suspicious. Kids say things that are just crazy and off the wall, so you need to have a good reason for thinking that somebody is abusing their child. But listen carefully, because unfortunately it does happen. A couple of websites you can look at here: healthychildren.org, and which is made from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and WebMD. Both I got a lot of my information from. So thank you so much for listening. I know this has been a long one to sit and listen to. But I appreciate your patience and hope that you will continue in this course and that you will do well. Thank you so much.